Hello everybody, and welcome to this video in which we're going to talk about who conforms more. All right, so we're going to talk about two variables that influence whether or not people conform more or less, and those are collectivism and individualism and gender. So first, let's talk about collectivism and individualism. So one of the more consistent differences between culture is how the people in that culture conceptualize individual people. All right, so people in cultures that are individualistic, like America, the United States, or Europe, all right, these cultures tend to be more individualistic, and so they have more of an independent self-control, meaning that they construe the self as independent from the group. And so although most people from the States or Europe would probably very willingly acknowledge that other people can influence them, they would believe and probably report that any influence other people have on them is only the influence, or primarily the influence, that they allow. All right, so they conceptualize the self as being separable from the group. It can be taken apart from it, right? Whereas those in collectivistic countries like East Asia, so your Korea, Japan, China, Vietnam, places like that. In these cultures, which are far more collectivistic, they tend to have more of an interdependent self-control, meaning they tend to interpret the self as being an integrated part of the group, all right, not easily separable from it. All right, so whereas people in individualistic countries tend to emphasize individual agency and autonomy, people from collectivistic countries tend to emphasize harmony and interdependence. Okay. Now, quite a bit of work shows that folks in collectivistic countries tend to conform more than folks in individualistic countries, and that makes a certain degree of sense. If you're a member of a collectivistic country and you think of the self as an integrated part of the group, then if the group does something, then you're going to be inclined to do that thing as well. Now, there's also some work suggesting that people in collectivistic countries, although they conform more on average, they don't conform more across the board. Specifically, they conform to familiar groups, they're in groups, more than they conform to stranger groups, groups that they don't belong to. Whereas in individualistic groups, that difference isn't as strong, right? So even though in individualistic groups they conform less on average, they conform roughly equally to familiar groups, the groups they belong to, and stranger groups, groups that they don't belong to. All right. So that's one answer to the question of who conforms more. And the answer is, that one answer is collectivistic countries. Another potential answer to the question of who conforms more is women. All right. So again, that's a potential answer because it's not as straightforward as that simple gender difference. All right. So on average, work shows, especially when they are conforming or when they are acting in front of others, women tend to conform more than men. Now, Eagley has offered the explanation that this is because when we are in the presence of others, we become concerned with the expectations of others. Those expectations include expectations of gender roles. And so one of the gender roles for women is that they seek harmonious relationships with others, and they're more other-oriented. Whereas one of the gender roles for men is that they're independent, and a man is an island, sort of thing. Now, Eagley would argue that when we are around others, when we're behaving in the presence of others, we're concerned with those gender roles, and we don't want, many of us, especially those of us who endorse gender roles, would be engaged in, would be concerned with verifying those gender roles. We would want to act in accordance with those gender roles. However, those of us who don't necessarily endorse gender roles, you might not see as big of a gender difference. But other work suggests that that concern with gender roles and leading to a gender difference in conformity is not universal, meaning it's not present in every situation. So, for example, Griscovicius and colleagues in a number of studies had participants think about finding a mate. So they activated this motive to find a romantic partner, or they had people think about their safety. So they had them think about protecting themselves. All right. Well, what they found is that, let's put the self-protection aside for a second. What they found is that when they had people think about mating, the usual gender difference showed up. All right. Women conformed more than men. All right. In fact, I have a visual aid to help you with that, to show that difference. Hold on a second, let me share my screen with you. There you go. All right. So here in the mate retention condition, right, we see that on average, women are conforming more than men. Women are the white squares, men are the black squares, the black bars. All right. So, so this white bar is taller, implying more conformity than this one. And this white bar is further up than this one, than this black bar, again, implying more conformity. So we see a profound gender difference, right? Now, certainly there's differences in conformity based on whether they're conforming to a positive behavior or a negative behavior, but we'll leave that for a discussion of it at a later time. All right. So when people are looking for a mate, Griscovicius and colleagues found that, yeah, that gender difference shows up. But when they had people think about their safety, when they made them concerned and motivated to protect themselves, that gender difference went away. Yeah, you can see a little bit of difference there, but it's nowhere near as big as these differences. So the gender difference largely went away. So when people are thinking about finding a mate, gender differences show up. When people are thinking about their safety, gender differences go away. So what does this suggest? Well, it suggests that while Eagly's explanation of wanting to confirm gender roles may be right, it suggests that it's only part of the answer. Specifically, it suggests that in instances where confirming gender roles becomes potentially important, gender roles influence whether people conform or not, but such as when mating. So why would gender roles matter when we mate? Well, when we're looking for a mate, we will have an idea of what we want. And the idea of what we want will be to some degree shaped by the standards and expectations that we've adopted from our culture. Cultures define gender roles. So gender roles become one of those expectations that we expect to in a potential mate. And so when we care about mating, when we are concerned with mating, suddenly men and women act in accordance with those gender roles. Makes a certain degree of sense, right? When I'm looking for a mate and on some level I know that mates are looking for someone who confirms gender roles, right? I'm going to behave in a manner consistent with those gender roles, increasing the chances of getting a mate, right? So in a mating context, gender roles might matter. But when I'm concerned with my safety, gender roles don't matter, right? Gender roles, women being supposedly needing to be more harmonious, men supposedly needing to be more independent, it doesn't matter. If I'm concerned with my own self-protection, gender roles become irrelevant. And so those gender roles, those gender differences, potentially, as Eagly says, that are caused by those gender roles, those differences go away. All right? So, in general, when gender roles are important or are relevant to the behavior, they may be more consequential. But when they aren't important or are not relevant to the behavior, they're less consequential. All right? So there we go. There are two instances, two answers to the question of who conforms more. People from collectivistic cultures tend to conform more on average. Women tend to conform more, at least when gender roles are relevant or influential. All right? All right, guys, that's it for this video. As always, if you have any questions, send them my way. If not, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you all later on.